Hi guys, welcome to another Day Direct session. Recently, I heard so many people around me asking about things like whether it's the right time to buy a property now, is the property market at its lowest now so that I can buy it for 300k now and sell it for 600k in few years time, etc, etc. Well, for me, I'm not going to advise you on that kind of things in this video, like telling you which property should you buy or should not buy. No, nothing about that. But if you are curious about what sort of criteria people take into consideration when buying a property, well, there are a few main things like rental yield or rental returns or whatever you might call it lah. Basically, it is about how much you can rent to your tenant if you are not utilizing the house for yourself. Is it enough to cover your installments or at least a large part of your installments? You see, I'll give you an example. If your monthly installment is 2k, and if it is a high rise, probably you will have to pay maintenance fee and sinking fund to the management. Take it as around 200, 200 per month lah. So your total expenses for that property is around 2.2k per month. And if you rent to a tenant for only 1k per month, then that's not a very good rental return, you see, because the rental that you have collected is not even enough to cover half of your expenses. Okay, that's one. Next, people also consider the chances that the value of the property would appreciate in the future because of the development or infrastructure around your property. Now, for example, maybe you know that in 2 years' time, there will be an education hub around your property, or some new mega malls, or even new township, etc, etc. Basically, you are buying the future of your property. And for this part, I expect your trusted property agent to be able to do a good job advising you on this criteria. So for today's video, mainly I'm listing down some quick facts for you so that next time you can understand better what your property agents and lawyers are trying to tell you. Number one, we will start with something basic like the terms that you will surely come across. Well, the most basic thing of all time, when you ask your property agent, hey bro, I'm looking for a property to buy or to invest, any recommendations? Now the first question that they will ask you is probably, okay, are you looking for projects or subsales? So what do they mean by that? When they say project, basically they are referring to newly launched properties or developments where you purchase directly from developers. And on the other hand, when they say subsales, it refers to second-hand properties where you buy from the previous owner. And now we will go slightly further on this point. If you ask me which is more worth buying, it is again a very subjective decision, because if you are looking for something below market, you might want to look at some subsale properties, and you can find desperate sellers who are willing to let go at a lower price, especially during this pandemic. You may end up being the one buying at the cheapest price in the whole building. Whereas for new projects, you buy it for 400k, the unit next to you is also 400k, the unit in front of you is also 400k, then what do you mean by below market? But of course, if you just don't like second-hand stuff, for example, you might be worrying whether there's any leaking or termites in the house or whatsoever, you might go for new projects lah. Okay, enough for that, it is your choice anyway. Number two, you probably hear lawyers telling you about title. For those who have owned the property before, I'm sure that you know about it, but surprisingly, for many of the first home buyers, they actually don't know what do we mean by title. So for those who have not come across this term, you might be wondering, hey, what is it, man? I have no Tan Sri title or datukship. Why this fella keep asking me about title? Well, title is basically the birth cert or identity card kind of thing for your property. If you are talking to some Chinese speaking uncles or aunties, instead of saying title, you might as well tell them Yalan or Galan or something like that, because that's what they call it. Probably because in Bahasa, that thing is called Geran Tanah. So they probably improvise the term from there. Okay, this is so important because the only way for you to prove your legal ownership on the property is by having your name registered on the title to the property. If the lawyers lost your original title during the sale and purchase transaction, they even have to make police report for that. Now you can see all the details of the land or the property on that piece of document itself. You will find almost everything there, whether it's a freehold or leasehold property, whether there's any restrictions for you to deal with the property, whether there's any caveat lodged on the property, etc, etc. I'm not going to go deeper on that. And that brings me to my third point. Number 3, freehold or leasehold. This is something that everybody should know before you're buying a property. In layman term, freehold property basically means that the property belongs to the owner forever. Whereas if you hold a leasehold property, it means that the government leased the land to you for a certain number of years, but the more common one is 99 years lah. So once the 99 years expire, the land will be returned to the government automatically. So preferably you should apply for renewal from the government by paying a certain rate of premium before the expiry date, so-called expiry date. Also, when you want to sell a leasehold property, the process will be definitely longer than selling a freehold property, because any dealings with the land will have to get a prior approval, or we call consent, from the state authority. And by dealings, I don't only mean selling, even if you want to do just like refinancing without change of ownership, consent from the land office is still required. So if you ask me, hey, then should I avoid buying a leasehold property? It's again a very subjective question. I would say you are right or wrong. Okay, because if you are planning to buy the house and pass it to your son, your grandson, generation by generation, then you may want to think twice before you buy a leasehold property, because the value of the leasehold property may not appreciate like how a freehold property will, especially when you're getting nearer and nearer to the 99 years so-called expiry date. But if you only plan to buy it now and sell it after 5, 7, 10 years, I don't think that you have to worry that much about it being a leasehold property. In fact, many of the projects nowadays, even right in the center of the city, it may be held under leasehold. So, and one more thing to bear in mind, even though generally a freehold property belongs to the owner forever, but the government can still acquire your land at any time for public purposes or economic developments like building MRT stations and so on and so forth under the Land Acquisition Act 1960. Of course, you'll be paid by the government a reasonable compensation based on the property's market value, so you don't have to worry much. But the moral of the story is that freehold property doesn't mean that you are safe from everything. Next, we move on to number 4. Many of my clients ask me questions on the RPGT, or we call it in full Real Property Gains Tax, or in BM, CKHT, which stands for Cukai Keuntungan Harta Tanah. So, they also ask me things like, can I get exemption? When can I get exemption? Well, before we talk about RPGT exemptions, first we need to understand what is it and why such tax incurred in the first place. So, since it is called Real Property Gains Tax, there must be gains in order for it to incur. Let me give you an example. If A bought a house for 400k a few years back and sell it at 350k a few years later, A did not gain anything because he is selling at a loss of 50k regardless of the interest Whereas if B bought a house for 400k a few years back and sell it at 500k a few years later, of course RPGT will incur because he has earned 100k by selling that property. Make sense? But the good news is, if you sell your property and your sale and purchase agreement is dated anytime between 1st June 2020 to 31st December 2021, which is the end of this year, you will be exempted from paying RPGT even if you have sold it at a higher price than the price you bought it, provided that your property must be a residential property. So if you are selling a shop lot, sorry, you are not covered. And this exemption is only limited to 3 disposals of property within the time frame, meaning that if you sell more than 3 properties between 1st June 2020 and 31st December 2021, only 3 properties out of that can be exempted from paying RPGT. Okay, but even if you have to pay RPGT, don't forget that you can always apply for deductions by submitting invoices or receipts of things like you have spent on the property so that you don't have to pay that much. For example, if you have done some renovations on the property and you happen to keep the receipt or the legal fee receipt that you have paid to your lawyers last time, give them all to your lawyer and ask them to submit to LHDN or Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri for deductions so that the tax is less painful for you. Number 5. Stamp duty, or in Bahasa they call it duty stamp. Well, the translation sounds stupid because it is basically direct translation, but in Mandarin they call it 印花税, Well, basically for any legal documents to take effect, you have to pay the stamp duty to LHDN and get it stamped. And before this, it was a physical stamp on your documents which looks like this, but now everything can be done online, and you just have to pay online and print out the stamp certificate and attach it to your documents. Then your documents will take effect. Do you think that's simple? Yes, it is simple, but expensive. Let me give you an example. If you are buying a property and you are taking a loan from any bank, you have to pay stamp duty for your sale and purchase agreement, number 1, and number 2, your loan agreement. And they are calculated separately. For S&P part, this is the stamp duty rate. Okay, I know you might be a bit confused looking at the table. I'm not going to go through everything here because that will be a mathematics class. So I'll just give you one example so that you get a picture of how painful it is to pay stamp duty. If you are buying a 500k property, as you can see in the table, for first 100k it is 1% stamp duty, so it is 1k. And for subsequent 400k is 2% stamp duty, so it is 8k. Meaning your stamp duty for S&P alone is already 9k. And for loan agreements, the stamp duty incurred is 0.5% flat. Imagine you obtain 90% loan, so it is 450k times 0.5%. Your stamp duty for loan agreement is 2250. That means the total stamp duty you have to pay to LHDN for a 500k property is 9k plus 2250. So in total, 11,250 ringgit. Make sense? But again, the good news is that there are certain stamp duty exemptions for first home buyers. If your S&P is dated anytime between 1st January 2021 to 31st December 2025 and you are buying a property below 500k, you don't have to pay any stamp duty because it is all waived. And we are not talking about the properties under home ownership campaign, or we call it HOC, because there is a special stamp duty exemption rules for new projects under HOC, and the threshold is higher. But we are not discussing that because if you buy a new project from developers, usually they will tell you stamp duty and legal fees either waived or covered by developers. So you seldom have to worry much about paying for these stamp duties if you directly buy properties from developer. So that brings me to my last point. Number 6, is your lawyer charging you extra? Now, most of the time when clients see lawyers' quotation or invoices, the first response is usually, wow, so expensive one, no wonder lawyers also rich lah, one case earn 20k. But is that really the case? If you look at the bill carefully, you will notice that a large percentage of the bill is actually for stamp duty, which I've told you the calculations 2 minutes ago. And the reason why lawyers include the stamp duty in their bill is because eventually they will be the one who will stamp your documents. So they are collecting it from you and later pay to LHDN. What the lawyers are earning is usually the very first column at the top of the whole bill, which is their professional fee. So brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen out there, don't blindly blame your lawyers please, for charging you so much. But I'm not here to defend my industry of course. Instead, I'm just trying to make you understand why you are paying so much and what you're actually paying for. Sounds good? So basically that concludes our video today. I hope that through this video you have got more ideas and insights on buying a property in Malaysia and understand better on some legal terms, rules and regulations. Of course, I'm not able to cover everything about buying property in this video, and if I happen to have missed certain points and you wish to know more on it, feel free to comment down below. We will try our best to address your questions. And lastly, please don't forget to like our video and click on the subscribe button to support our channel so that we can have more content for you guys in future. Thank you very much and see you in our next video.